Morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through the bedroom curtains. David was already up, adjusting his tie in the mirror with the confident precision of a man who believed himself in complete control of his narrative. "Big day," he announced, spotting me in the reflection. "The Martinez pre-trial should be straightforward, but you never know with her. She's got a reputation for being unpredictable." "I've heard that," I replied neutrally, selecting a charcoal gray Channel suit from my closet, professional, understated, appropriate for what would unfold. The suit was one David had never seen before, purchased for professional appearances where Natalie Chen required a particular image distinct from Natalie Harrington's carefully curated wardrobe. David turned, eyebrows raised. "That's a serious outfit for your lunch with the Foundation ladies." "I thought I might stop by the courthouse afterward," I said, the first direct hint I had ever offered about my true intentions. "See how your conference goes." He laughed, the sound dismissive and fond in equal measure. "Curious about the legal world again? Don't worry about it, sweetheart. These proceedings are tedious. You'd be bored to tears. Let's have dinner tonight instead. I'll tell you all the interesting parts." "I'm sure you will," I murmured, watching as he collected his briefcase and checked his watch, a Patek Philippe I had given him for our 5th anniversary because he believed it had been purchased with his own money through an account I managed for him. "I'm meeting Marcus for breakfast before court. Don't wait up if things run late tonight. These first days can sometimes turn into strategy sessions over dinner." Strategy sessions that increasingly involved his assistant Rebecca, though he didn't mention that detail. I had no illusions about David's fidelity, having documented his indiscretions with the same methodical attention I applied to his ethical breaches. The information was stored securely but had never been needed. My concerns were professional rather than personal at this point in our marriage. After he left, I completed my preparations with deliberate calm. The documents were arranged in my briefcase, my arguments mentally organized. This wasn't about humiliating David or seeking some dramatic revenge. It was simply time for a professional reckoning that was long overdue. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:45 a.m., proceeding directly to Judge Martinez's chambers, where Mariana and 2 members of the ethics committee waited. No one seemed surprised by my appearance except the court clerk, who had only ever seen me at social functions as David's wife. "Ms. Chen," Judge Martinez greeted me formally, though her eyes held a glimmer of something like anticipation. "The committee has reviewed your documentation and finds the concerns merit immediate attention." "Thank you, Your Honor," I replied, taking the seat indicated, not in a gallery where wives and observers sat, but at the counsel table where attorneys presented their cases. At precisely 9:01 a.m., the door opened and David entered with Marcus following closely behind. He stopped short when he saw me, confusion flickering across his features. "Natalie? What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" His tone conveyed bewilderment tinged with irritation, as though my presence was an unexpected complication in his carefully planned day. Before I could respond, Judge Martinez spoke. "Mr. Harrington, please be seated. This conference has been reconvened to address ethical concerns regarding your handling of the Westridge International case." David's expression shifted immediately to professional concern, though his eyes continued to dart between the judge and me. "Ethical concerns? With all due respect, Your Honor, this is the first I'm hearing of any such issues." "That's precisely the problem," I stated, rising to my feet. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward me. "David Harrington, I am appearing today as Natalie Chen, Special Counsel to Westridge International for the past 8 years and principal of Chen Legal Strategies." The blood drained from David's face as he struggled to reconcile the woman he had married with the attorney, now standing before him in an official capacity. Marcus, beside him, showed no surprise, only a thoughtful consideration that suggested he might have suspected something of the truth. "This is some kind of joke," David managed finally, looking to Marcus for confirmation of this impossibility. "Natalie doesn't, she isn't." "Ms. Chen's credentials have been verified by the court," Judge Martinez interrupted, her tone leaving no room for debate. "As have the documented instances where you, Mr. Harrington, received privileged information regarding Westridge International through your marital relationship with their counsel." David stared at me, genuine shock replacing his initial confusion. "You're their counsel? But you dropped out of Harvard after a year, you told me." "I never told you that," I corrected calmly. "You assumed it, and I allowed the assumption to stand. I completed my law degree with honors, passed the bar in 3 states, and have maintained an active international practice throughout our marriage. But I would have known, David insisted, his voice rising slightly as he grappled with this fundamental revision to his understanding of reality. The money, your schedule, your work. The money you attributed to a non-existent trust fund, I explained. The schedule you never questioned because you were too busy with your own career. The work you dismissed as charity planning and social coordination. The ethics committee members exchanged glances, making notes as David's professional demeanor crumbled further with each revelation. Why? He demanded, anger now mixing with his disbelief. Why maintain this charade for 7 years? Was it all some elaborate setup to trap me in an ethics violation? No, I reply evenly. It began as simple convenience. You created a narrative about who I was, and correcting that narrative seemed unnecessary to our personal relationship. You were content with your supportive wife, and I was content with my separate professional identity. Until now, he noted bitterly. Until you could use it against me. Until you created an actual conflict of interest by taking on my client as your opposition. I corrected. A conflict that could have been avoided with a single genuine conversation about my work. Mariana stepped forward, presenting the committee with a comprehensive timeline of events. As documented here, Mr. Harrington has received substantial information about Westridge International's strategic positions through casual conversations with Ms. Chen, who maintained appropriate professional boundaries, but could not prevent all information transfer within a marital relationship. David's face flushed with anger. So you've been spying on me? Recording our private conversations. Documenting relevant professional interactions, I clarified, as any attorney would when faced with a potential ethics concern. The meeting proceeded with clinical efficiency after that. The committee reviewed the evidence, questioned both David and me about specific instances of information transfer, and consulted briefly among themselves before rendering their decision. The committee finds that Mr. Harrington's continued representation of Meridian Corporation against Westridge International constitutes an irreparable conflict of interest, the chairperson announced. His firm is hereby disqualified from the case, and Mr. Harrington personally will be required to complete additional ethics training under supervision. This citation will remain in his professional record. It wasn't a devastating professional blow, not career-ending by any means, but it represented a significant setback and public embarrassment that David had never anticipated. As the proceedings concluded, Judge Martinez called both of us to her chambers privately. I've watched this scenario unfold for years, she told David bluntly. Attended your dinner parties, listened to you dismiss your wife's legal opinions while quoting her published analyses without realizing they were hers. It's been an uncomfortable position for many of us who know Natalie in both capacities. David looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. All those people at our events, the judges, the senior partners, the clients, how many of them knew? More than you might think, I admitted. Caroline Harrison has been one of my most vocal advocates on the circuit court bench. Judge Winters consulted me on international precedent for his landmark decision last year. Even Marcus has worked with my team, though he never made the connection between Natalie Chen and Natalie Harrington. David sat heavily in a chair, the full implications washing over him. The Westridge contract, the one I believed I'd secured through my reputation, was my client first, I confirmed. I recommended your firm because your domestic litigation department is genuinely excellent. There was no deception there, merely a professional referral. And Marcus, David glanced toward the door where his associate waited, was hired by my recommendation as well, I acknowledged. His international law background complements your firm's domestic strengths. Again, a professional assessment, not personal manipulation. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. This places the court in an unusual position, but not an unprecedented one. Ms. Chen has recused herself from direct involvement in any cases opposing your firm, Mr. Harrington, and has disclosed all potential conflicts to the appropriate authorities. Her ethical conduct is not in question here. Just mine, David said bitterly. Your failure to conduct basic due diligence, Judge Martinez corrected. A failure that has now resulted in professional consequences. We left the courthouse separately that day, David to face his colleagues and explain the disqualification, me to continue my work as I always had. The weight that had settled between my shoulders years ago, the constant vigilance required to maintain my dual identities, had not disappeared entirely, but had shifted into something more manageable. That evening, I returned to our home uncertain of what awaited. David sat in the living room, a glass of scotch in hand, surrounded by legal journals and industry publications spread across the coffee table. "I found your articles," he said without preamble. 7 years of legal analysis I've quoted without knowing they were yours. Cases I've discussed at dinner while you sat quietly, never mentioning you'd written the definitive guidance on the very issues I was struggling with. You never asked, I replied simply, setting down my briefcase. No, he acknowledged. I never did. He picked up a legal journal with my name prominently featured. Natalie Chen, leading authority on international corporate structures. My wife, the woman I believed needed my explanation of basic legal concepts. I said nothing, waiting as he worked through the implications himself. "Do you know what hurts the most?" he asked finally, not the professional embarrassment or even the ethics citation. "It's realizing that for 7 years I've been married to a brilliant legal mind, exactly the kind of intellectual partner I'd always claimed to want, and I was too blind, too arrogant to see it." The admission surprised me with its self-awareness, a quality David rarely demonstrated. "You saw what you expected to see," I offered, "neither accusation nor absolution." "And you let me," he countered. "All those opportunities to correct me, to reveal who you really are. Why didn't you?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself numerous times over the years. At first, it seemed simpler. Your narrative was convenient for both of us. You had the supportive wife you wanted, and I had the privacy to build my practice without the complications that come with being married to competing counsel. And later, I considered the question carefully. Later, I became curious how long it could continue, how long you would maintain your assumptions without ever questioning them. It became a sort of experiment, he finished for me, with me as the unwitting subject. With both of us as subjects, I corrected. I was equally complicit in maintaining the fiction. David set down his glass, his movements deliberate. "What happens now?" he asked, the question encompassing both our personal and professional futures. "Professionally, we establish proper boundaries. I've already implemented firewalls between my practice and any cases involving your firm. The ethics committee will monitor compliance, but there's no reason our careers can't continue without further incident." "And personally," you pressed, "is there anything real between us, Natalie, or was our entire marriage as much a fiction as my understanding of your career?" It was a fair question, perhaps the first truly insightful one he had ever asked about our relationship. There were real moments, I acknowledge, thinking of vacations where we had connected despite the underlying deception. Conversations that had veered into genuine territory despite the careful boundaries I maintained. But a marriage built on such significant misconceptions can't be wholly authentic. You never really knew me, David. You knew the version of me that fit comfortably into your narrative. "And now," he pressed. "Now we have choices to make," I said. "You can finally get to know Natalie Chen, with all her complexities and capabilities, or we can acknowledge that the foundation wasn't strong enough to build upon." David studied me with an intensity I had rarely seen from him outside the courtroom. "I'd like to try," he said finally, "to know who you actually are, if you're willing." His response surprised me. I had anticipated anger, recrimination, perhaps even an immediate move toward divorce. Not this tentative openness to reimagining our relationship. "I'll need space," I said after a moment's consideration. "Physical and emotional distance to reassess without the patterns we've established." "You're moving out?" The alarm in his voice was evident. "Temporarily," I confirmed. "I maintain an apartment for late work nights. It makes sense for me to stay there while we determine next steps." The next morning, I moved into my private apartment, the one I had maintained throughout our marriage for late work nights and international calls. The space was smaller than our penthouse, but reflected my actual taste rather than the compromised aesthetic of our shared home. Modern art hung on the walls, legal texts filled the bookshelves, and no trace of the supportive wife persona existed within its walls. David and I agreed to a trial separation, a period of reassessment without the dynamics that had defined our relationship for so long. We established parameters that acknowledged our new reality. Professional courtesy in any case where our interests might intersect, limited personal contact to allow genuine reflection, and complete honesty moving forward, regardless of where that honesty led us.